Good evening, listeners. My name is EveningWhisperTales. Tonight, I'll be telling you some scary horror stories to help you relax and fall asleep. If you enjoy this channel, I'd really appreciate it if you like and subscribe. Now, let's begin our evening together. Story 1. My brother started coming home. Before he left work, my younger brother Aaron moved in after his breakup, and at first the adjustment was easy. We'd grown up sharing a house, so slipping back into routines felt natural. Late dinners, arguing about what to watch, him stealing snacks he didn't buy. The only unusual part was his schedule. He worked evening maintenance at a manufacturing plant across town, clocking in at 3 p.m. and getting home just after midnight. The first strange moment came on a Tuesday. I was working from home and heard the front door open around noon. I assumed Aaron forgot something and came back early. I called out to him from my office, but he didn't answer. I stepped into the hallway and saw his jacket hanging on the rack and his shoes placed neatly beneath it. The kitchen light was on. A glass sat on the counter, still half full of water. I checked the rest of the house. Empty. At 12:40, my phone buzzed. Aaron, just clocked in. I stared at the message, then at his shoes. I texted back, asking if he'd stopped home first. He replied with a photo of the time clock at work and told me I was losing it. I didn't mention the glass. That evening, he came home normally, tossed his keys on the table, and complained about a coworker like always. I asked if he'd returned earlier and he laughed, saying he hadn't left the building since his shift started. The next day, it happened again. Door opening around noon, footsteps across the living room. This time I stayed in my office and listened. The refrigerator opened. Cabinets shifted softly. Someone moved through the house with total familiarity, not searching, not sneaking, just existing there. I stepped out quickly. No one. But the TV remote had moved from the couch to the armchair where Aaron usually sat. At 12:52, my phone buzzed again. Aaron, break just started. I asked what he'd been doing the last hour. He sent back a confused question mark. That night, I told him everything. He checked his shoes, his jacket, the glass, and finally stopped smiling. He said something similar had happened at work. Tools he'd left in one room appearing in another before he went there. Co-workers greeting him in areas he hadn't reached yet. We decided to test it. The next afternoon, he stayed at work and video called me during the time the door usually opened. We both watched the entryway camera together. At 12:37, the door unlocked, slowly. It opened inward just enough for someone to step through, but no one appeared in frame. The camera didn't glitch. The hallway light shifted as if a body blocked it. Footsteps sounded faintly through the phone speaker, the same rhythm I heard every day. Aaron whispered through the call, "I'm still at work." The invisible presence crossed the living room and stopped directly in front of my office door. My doorknob turned slightly. Then Aaron spoke again, quieter. "I think it's me. I just haven't gotten there yet." Story 2. My girlfriend keeps leaving the apartment before she arrives home. When my girlfriend Maya and I first moved in together, we had opposite schedules. I worked mornings at the hardware store, and she worked late shifts at a small restaurant downtown. Most nights I was half asleep when she came home, just hearing the door unlock and the familiar sound of her keys landing in the ceramic bowl by the entrance. After a few weeks, I started noticing something off about the timing. One night, I woke at 11:48 p.m. to the sound of the door closing. I heard her steps cross the living room and pause near the bedroom, like she always did before checking if I was awake. I kept my eyes closed and mumbled goodnight when the mattress dipped slightly beside me. No reply came. I rolled over. The bed was empty. I checked my phone. 12:32 a.m. A text from Maya. Just finished closing, heading home. Now I sat there for a long time staring at it. The next night I stayed awake on purpose. Lights off, TV muted. At 11:41 I heard the lock turn. The door opened halfway, then shut gently. The bowl chimed softly as if keys touched it. I stood up immediately and stepped into the hallway. Nothing. But the faint smell of her shampoo lingered in the air, fresh like she'd just passed me. At 12:15 my phone buzzed again. Leaving work, I told her what was happening. She laughed at first, then grew uneasy when she remembered something similar. Her coworkers saying she'd already walked past them earlier in the night when she was still in the kitchen. One even waved goodbye to her before she'd clocked out. We set up a camera facing the front door. The next evening, we watched together over video call while she was still at work. At 11:46, the door unlocked on screen. The handle turned slowly. The door opened inward 6 inches and paused. No one stood there, but the hallway light dimmed slightly as if someone blocked it. As soon as Edford heard it in the apartment behind me too. Footsteps crossing the floor. Maya whispered through my phone, "I'm still in the restaurant." The invisible figure stopped at the bedroom doorway. The camera angle showed nothing but the carpet fibers pressed down one step at a time, moving toward me. I backed away. The indentation on the mattress formed beside me, exactly where she normally lay. At that same moment, she said, "I just stepped outside." The pressure lifted. The door camera showed the front door open again, and close. When Maya actually arrived 20 minutes later, she hesitated before entering and asked a question that stayed with me. "Did I already go to bed?" Story 3. My best friend. Stayed over, but he never slept. My best friend. Lucas had been crashing at my place for about a week after a fight with his parents. We'd grown up together, so it felt normal again. Late night games, leftover pizza, arguing over music while my girlfriend complained we were acting like teenagers again. The only odd thing was that he never seemed tired. Lucas had always been the kind of guy who passed out halfway through a movie, but now every morning he was already awake when I got up, sitting at the kitchen table scrolling through his phone or staring out the window like he'd been there a long time. I asked him once if the couch was uncomfortable when he shrugged. Didn't sleep much. But it wasn't just that he didn't sleep. I never heard him go to bed either. The first night I noticed I woke around 3 a.m. to get water and saw the living room light still on. Lucas sat on the couch exactly the same way he had been when I went to bed hours earlier, elbows on knees, eyes on the dark TV screen. "You good?" I asked. He nodded without looking at me. "Yeah." I assumed he couldn't sleep. The second night was the same, third night too. By the fourth, my girlfriend asked me why Lucas kept pacing the hallway late at night. I told her he didn't. I'd only ever seen him sitting still, but she insisted she heard footsteps outside the bedroom and the soft sound of someone stopping at the door before turning back. I asked Lucas about it at breakfast. He looked confused. "I wasn't up." My girlfriend insisted she'd heard him whispering once, like he was talking to someone quietly so we wouldn't wake. That night I stayed up intentionally, pretending to fall asleep on the couch while Lucas scrolled his phone nearby. Around 2:17 a.m., he set the phone down and stood. Instead of heading toward the bathroom or kitchen, he walked slowly down the hallway toward my bedroom. I followed a few seconds later. The hallway was empty, but my bedroom door was slightly open. Inside, my girlfriend slept undisturbed. No Lucas. I checked the bathroom. Empty. Kitchen. Empty. Then I heard the couch creak behind me. Lucas sat there again. Same position as before. "Dude," I said, heart racing. "Did you just walk down the hall?" He looked at me like I was joking. "No, I've been here." I didn't sleep after that. The next night, I set my phone to record the living room while we went to bed. In the morning, I watched the footage alone. At 2:14 a.m., Lucas stood and walked toward the hallway. 3 seconds later, another Lucas sat up on the couch. The first never came back. The second remained, scrolling quietly until sunrise. I checked the couch beside me. Lucas was still asleep there. Story 4. My sister called me from inside the house. While standing outside, my sister Emma lives 15 minutes away, but she drops by often without warning, usually late in the evening after work. One night she texted asking if she could come over to talk because she'd had a bad day, so I told her the door would be unlocked. Around 9:30 I heard footsteps upstairs. Not loud, just the careful kind people make when they don't want to disturb anyone. I assumed she'd let herself in and gone to the bathroom. I called up to her that I was in the kitchen. No answer. Then my phone rang. Emma's name. I picked up, half laughing. "You don't have to call me from upstairs." Her voice came through the phone, slightly out of breath. "I'm outside." I froze. "You just walked in." "No," she said slowly. "I'm in the driveway." I stepped into the hallway and looked up the staircase. The light upstairs was on, and I heard movement, soft pacing from my bedroom to the spare room like someone exploring carefully. "Emma," I whispered into the phone, "don't come inside yet." She asked why, but I didn't answer. I walked halfway up the stairs and called her name aloud. The footsteps stopped immediately. The upstairs air felt warmer than the rest of the house, like someone had been there a while. My bedroom door was open. I always keep it closed, and the closet inside stood ajar. My phone stayed at my ear. "Are you in?" she asked again. I backed down the stairs slowly and unlocked the front door for her. She stepped inside and immediately noticed the upstairs light. I didn't turn that on. We searched together, every room, every closet, even the attic hatch. Nothing. That night she refused to stay, but as she left she paused at the porch and asked if I'd gone upstairs again. I hadn't moved. She pointed toward the second floor window. Someone stood behind the curtain, my height, perfectly still, watching us leave. Story 5. My girlfriend's brother slept in the guest room, but he never arrived. My girlfriend, Leah's younger brother, Sam, was supposed to stay with us for a few days while his apartment was being fumigated. We picked up extra groceries, made the guest room ready, and waited for him to arrive after his evening shift. Around 8:40 p.m., I heard the front door open. Keys clinked against a ceramic bowl and footsteps crossed into the hallway. I called out to him, but he didn't answer. I assumed he was tired and dropped his bag straight into the guest room, so I went back to cooking while Leah finished a phone call in the living room. A few minutes later, she asked if Sam had already come in. I told her yes, I'd heard him. We checked the hallway. The guest room door was closed. Inside, the bed sheets were pulled down slightly and the pillow indented as though someone had laid their head there for a moment. The closet door hung open too, but the room was empty. Leah laughed nervously and said maybe I imagined it. At 9:12, her phone rang. Sam. He told her he was still at work, just closing up and leaving soon. We stared at the bed. When he finally arrived at 9:35, we asked if he'd stopped by earlier as a joke. He swore he hadn't and even showed us his ride history, proving he'd come straight from work. We let it go. That night at 2:03 a.m., I woke to soft movement in the hallway, someone walking barefoot, slow and steady. The guest room door creaked open and then shut. I assumed Sam had gotten water. In the morning, the kitchen light was on and a glass sat in the sink. Sam was still asleep in the guest room. Leah asked if I'd been up. I hadn't. We checked the guest room together. The indentation in the pillow was deeper than before, and the blanket folded down neatly along one side, like someone else had gotten out carefully without waking him. Sam moved out the next day. He said he never slept well because he felt like someone climbed into bed hours before he did, and left right before morning. Story 6. My friend and I heard our conversation playing back from the woods. Last autumn, my friend Daniel and I went camping at a small state forest we'd visited since high school. It was the kind of place we liked because nothing ever happened there. Just a quiet lake, a few scattered campsites, and long trails where you could walk for hours without seeing anyone. We arrived late afternoon, set up the tent, and spent the evening talking beside the fire while the last light drained from the trees. Around midnight, we were still awake, arguing about an old memory from college, who had actually started a fight at a party years ago. We laughed louder than we should have in the quiet and eventually let the fire burn low. That's when we heard it. Our voices, not echoes. Echoes distort and fade. This was clear, like someone nearby repeating us seconds after we spoke. At first I thought other campers were mocking us, but the sound came from deeper in the forest where there were no trails. Daniel called out jokingly, asking who was there. The woods answered in his voice, same tone, same pacing, repeating the question a moment later. We stopped talking. The forest stayed silent for a long minute. Then, softly, our earlier conversation played back again. Sentences we'd spoken 10 minutes before, layered faintly between the trees like a recording drifting toward us. We packed up quickly, laughing nervously and blaming acoustics over water. As we walked toward the car, Daniel froze. From behind us, his voice said, "Wait, I dropped my keys." He was beside me. Neither of us had spoken. We drove out without looking back. The next day, my phone contained a voice memo I never recorded. 20 minutes of our campfire conversation ending with the sound of footsteps circling the tent after we'd already left. Story 7. My wife came home from work while sitting beside me. My wife Natalie works late shifts at a pharmacy across town, so most evenings I'm home alone until close to midnight. We keep a routine. She texts when she locks up, calls during the drive, and I usually wait on the couch so she doesn't come home to a dark house. One Thursday, I was watching TV around 10:50 p.m. when I heard her keys drop into the ceramic bowl by the front door. I smiled automatically and called out that I'd kept dinner warm. No answer came. I walked into the hallway and saw her purse on the table, coat hanging neatly where she always leaves it. The bathroom light turned on down the hall and the sink ran briefly. I assumed she was washing her hands. My phone buzzed. Natalie. Just closed, leaving now. I stared at it, then at the bathroom door. Water shut off inside. I knocked lightly. Nat? Silence. I opened the door. Dry sink. No steam. No one there. Her purse still sat in the hallway. I picked it up, empty except for a receipt from the morning. Her keys were gone. 5 minutes later, headlights filled the driveway and she walked in, shaking rain from her jacket. I didn't tell her immediately. I thought maybe I'd imagined sounds, mixed memory with habit. But as she walked past me, she stopped and frowned. "Did you move my coat?" I hadn't. She picked it up slowly. "I hung this up earlier." That night around 2:15 a.m., she woke me. She said she'd heard the front door open and close again and assumed I was getting water. We checked together. The hallway light was on and the bowl held a second set of keys identical to hers. The next evening, we stayed on the couch together, waiting for her shift to end. At 10:48 p.m., the lock turned. The door opened halfway. No one stood there, but cold air rushed in and footsteps crossed the living room carpet, compressing fibers one step at a time toward the hallway. Natalie squeezed my arm. Her phone rang, her manager asking if she'd left yet. She hadn't. The invisible steps stopped directly in front of us, then slowly continued past, into the bedroom. The bedroom door shut gently. Natalie whispered she didn't want to sleep in there. At 11:02, she finally arrived home for real. The bedroom light was already on, and the bed sheets were folded back on her side, waiting. Story 8. My best friend texted me from a night we hadn't lived yet. Evan and I text constantly, usually dumb stuff, memes, complaints about work, reminders about plans we keep forgetting to make. So when I woke up Saturday morning to a long message from him describing our entire evening together, I assumed I'd fallen asleep early and forgotten half the night. He wrote about the bar we'd gone to, the argument we overheard near the pool table, the way I spilled a drink and blamed him. The details were weirdly specific, including a joke I would definitely have remembered making, except the night hadn't happened yet. We were scheduled to meet that evening. I asked him why he was messing with me. He replied immediately, "What do you mean?" "You just left." I sent a photo of my kitchen table, breakfast untouched, sunlight through the window. He stopped replying for a few minutes, then called, sounding genuinely shaken. He insisted we'd hung out until almost 2 a.m., even describing the song playing when we walked out. Told him to relax and we'd just see each other later. That evening, we met anyway. Every single thing he'd written happened. Same bartender comment, same argument near the pool table, same song as we left. I didn't spill the drink. I held onto it carefully. But someone bumped me at the door and it still splashed onto the floor exactly like he described. Evan went pale. He pulled out his phone and showed me a second message I'd supposedly sent him at 1:52 a.m., one I hadn't written yet. "Don't walk home tonight." We hadn't left the bar yet. We took a taxi instead. When I checked my phone the next morning, the message existed in my sent folder, time-stamped hours before I'd typed anything that night. Story 9. My daughter keeps playing with the neighbor's kid who moved away. Years ago, when we moved into the neighborhood, everyone told us how quiet the street was. Families stayed for decades, kids grew up together, and not much changed. So when my daughter Lily started mentioning a girl named Nora from next door, it sounded perfect, an instant friend her age. The only problem was the house next door was empty. It had been for years, according to our neighbor across the street, Mrs. Keller, who'd lived there longer than anyone. The previous family moved away after their daughter got sick, she said, and the place had been on and off the market ever since. I assumed Lily meant a kid visiting relatives. Then I noticed she never went into the yard to meet her. She always played near the fence, talking through the slats or sitting in the grass beside it. Sometimes she'd bring toys and carefully line them up along the boundary, like she was sharing them with with someone just out of sight. I asked what Nora looked like. She described a girl with a yellow sweater and a braid who didn't like going far from the back steps because her mom worries. That evening, I checked the yard next door. No toys, no footprints. The back steps dusty from disuse. A few nights later, Lily woke crying because Nora couldn't come out anymore after dark. She said Nora's house didn't have lights at night the way ours did, and she didn't like when it got quiet inside. I finally knocked on the front door of the empty house, half expecting a confused realtor to answer. No one did, but through the window I saw something small on the floor in the living room. A faded yellow sweater folded neatly near the staircase. The next day, Mrs. Keller saw Lily at the fence and went pale. She told me the family who lived there had a daughter named Nora, and she used to wear that same sweater constantly. She never liked playing inside, Mrs. Keller said softly, especially after the house got quiet. That night, Lily asked if Nora could sleep over because she didn't want to stay alone in her house anymore. Around midnight, our back door creaked open slightly, and small muddy footprints appeared on the kitchen floor, stopping beside Lily's bedroom door. Story 10. I'm a police officer and my body cam recorded. A conversation I had alone. Night shifts are usually paperwork and driving loops through quiet streets, which is why the call didn't stand out at first. Dispatch sent me to check an abandoned storefront after a passerby reported hearing voices inside. The building had been empty for years. Windows papered over, doors chained shut except for a side entrance we used when checking alarms. I unlocked it and stepped inside with my flashlight and body cam running. Dust covered the floor so evenly that every step I took left sharp prints behind me. No second set, no disturbance, just mine. I called out police and listened. Nothing. I cleared the front room, then the hallway leading to storage rooms. Halfway down, I heard a reply. A man's voice answering calmly from ahead, as if continuing a conversation already in progress. I thought it was a squatter and followed the sound, but every room I opened was empty. Eventually I exited, locked the door, and cleared the call. At the station later, my partner watched the footage with me. The video showed me walking through the building alone, but the audio didn't. Throughout the recording, a second voice spoke with me, responding directly to my questions, asking me why I'd come back again, telling me the place looked different now. I remembered saying none of those follow-up questions. The timestamp matched a homicide I'd responded to early in my career. Same address before it was abandoned. At the end of the footage, just before I left, the unseen voice asked if I'd found the body yet. I never mentioned a body that night, but years ago one had been discovered behind that exact storage door. Story 11. My girlfriend's best friend. Stayed over, but my girlfriend never came home. My girlfriend Clara texted saying she'd be late from work, so I made dinner and waited. Around 9:15, there was a knock. Her best friend Maya, who sometimes stopped by unannounced. She said Clara told her to come in and wait. We talked for an hour, watching TV and joking the way we always did when the three of us hung out. Maya even called Clara once asking where she was, but the call went to voicemail. Around 10:30, Clara finally texted, "Just leaving now." Maya looked confused. "She's been here all evening." I laughed, thinking she meant earlier in the week, but she pointed toward the kitchen. There were 2 used plates, 2 glasses, one still warm. I checked the hallway. Clara's coat hung on the rack. At 10:52, the front door opened and Clara walked in, surprised to see both of us staring. She hadn't been home all day. Maya went pale and asked who she'd been talking to for the last hour, because whoever it was knew things only Clara would, including a story from their childhood she'd never told me. Story 12, Night Shift in the Morgue. The tag changed. After I left the room, I work intake at a hospital morgue, mostly paperwork and transferring patients from ER to storage. One evening, we received an unidentified man from a car accident. No wallet, no phone, just basic descriptors. I printed the temporary tow tag and placed him in drawer 6. 10 minutes later, my coworker asked why I'd updated the name. I hadn't. We opened the drawer. The tag now displayed a full name and birth date. We checked records. The police hadn't identified him yet. The name matched a missing person reported earlier that same day by a woman who hadn't arrived at the hospital yet. When she finally came in hours later, she froze upon seeing the tag. She asked who told us already. No one had. Later, reviewing cameras, we saw the drawer open briefly while I was in another room. No one stood there, but the printer activated at the same time, producing the updated tag. Story 13. The case file started writing my reports before I did after. 15 years in uniform, you learn paperwork never ends. Most officers complain about it. I didn't mind. Reports keep things clear, factual, grounded. That's why the first incident felt like a simple system error. I opened my laptop to finish a burglary report I'd barely started. The template already contained 3 paragraphs describing the scene in detail. The broken kitchen window, the overturned chair, the muddy shoe print beside the sink. I hadn't typed a word yet. I checked timestamps, created at 2:14 a.m. during the call itself. My body cam should have matched it, but I remembered dictating only short notes, planning to finish later at the station. My partner Rivera leaned over my shoulder and asked why I had written so much already. I told him I hadn't. He thought I was joking until we compared it with the footage. The report described things I hadn't discovered yet, like the jewelry box hidden under the bed. We'd only found it near the end of the search. We brushed it off as voice-to-text glitch pulling from audio somehow. Then the next night happened. A missing car report appeared in the system under my badge number before dispatch even called me. It listed the correct street and license plate, information I didn't receive until 10 minutes later. I tried ignoring it, but the worst came a week later when I opened a new file and found a completed report waiting. The narrative detailed a domestic dispute ending in a fatality, including my arrival time and the exact sentence I would later tell the victim's brother at the door. The call came 40 minutes after I read it. Everything unfolded exactly as written, right down to where I stood in the hallway while speaking. At the bottom of the report was one final line I hadn't reached yet. Officer remained on scene longer than necessary. I closed the laptop early that night because I suddenly felt like something was waiting for me to finish writing what hadn't happened yet. Story 14. My best friend keeps showing up in photos from nights he didn't attend. My friend Aaron moved across the country 2 years ago, but we still met online every weekend to play games with the same group. Me, my girlfriend Lena, and 2 others. One evening, Lena scrolled through her phone laughing at old party pictures from before he moved. Then she stopped. Aaron stood in the background of a photo taken 6 months after he left, leaning against the wall behind us while we cut a birthday cake. I told her she must have mixed dates, but the timestamp and decorations matched the night exactly. He'd been video calling us that evening, not there physically. We asked the others, Everyone remembered him joking through the speaker, not standing in the kitchen. Then more appeared, a restaurant photo. Aaron seated at the end of the booth while his car was tracked 3 states away that same night. A movie ticket selfie, his reflection visible. In the glass poster case, though, he'd missed the trip entirely. Finally, we asked him. He laughed until we sent the images. Silence followed. He admitted he sometimes dreamed of hanging out with us. Normal nights, nothing strange, but he'd wake convinced they'd actually happened. He even remembered details from events he couldn't have attended. Last week, Lena's new group picture finished uploading. In it, Aaron stands beside me with his hand on my shoulder. I remember posing alone. Story 15. Night shift at the hospital. The patient was discharged before he arrived. I helped transport patients from ER to rooms overnight. Around 3 a.m., the quiet makes routines mechanical. Check wristband, confirm name, move gurney, log arrival. Dispatch sent me to pick up a man for room 412. When I reached ER, the nurse looked confused and said the patient hadn't come in yet. But the chart in my tablet showed full vitals, diagnosis, and my own signature confirming transport. I checked the room upstairs. The bed was warm and slightly lowered like someone had just gotten up. Bathroom sink damp. A hospital gown folded neatly on the chair. An hour later, the ambulance finally arrived carrying the same man. As I wheeled him into 412, he stared around slowly and said, "I was already here earlier. You told me I could go home." I'd never seen him before, but my login recorded a discharge 2 hours prior, including notes written in my style explaining the exit instructions. Story 16. The interrogation room. Camera recorded. Someone I never brought in. The night started quietly. Paperwork stacked high, coffee going cold beside the keyboard, until dispatch asked me to interview a man who'd walked into the lobby, claiming he had information about an old case. I escorted him to interview room B, sat him down, and told him I'd grab a recorder. By the time I returned 30 seconds later, the chair was empty. The lobby officer swore. No one had left. The hallway camera showed me entering the room alone and leaving alone. No one followed me in, no one walked out. I assumed he got nervous and slipped past somehow, and I started writing a quick note about it. Then the tech called me into the monitoring office. The interrogation camera had recorded the entire time. On screen, I entered the room, but I didn't sit alone. Another person sat across from me, a man I recognized immediately, the suspect from a missing persons case closed years ago, after he died in custody. The video showed us talking calmly for several minutes while I reviewed paperwork that didn't exist in my hands. The audio picked up both voices clearly. He asked if I'd figured out what happened after he disappeared. I answered him in the recording, even though I remembered saying nothing. The timestamp matched the present. I checked the chair afterward, still warm. Story 17. My friend stayed the night and knew things from my dream. My friend Tyler crashed at my apartment after a late shift, taking the couch while my girlfriend and I slept in the bedroom. I had a strange dream, walking through a hallway I didn't recognize, stopping at a door painted green, hearing someone knock from inside instead of outside. I woke uneasy but didn't mention it. At breakfast, Tyler joked about my green hallway nightmare and asked if I'd opened the door yet. I froze because I'd never described it to anyone. He shrugged and said I'd been talking in my sleep, but he repeated details I knew I hadn't spoken. The peeling paint, the number scratched into the handle, the sound behind the door asking to be let out. That night, he refused to sleep in the living room again. He said he'd heard the knocking too, not from me, from the hallway outside my bedroom while I was still dreaming. Story 18. The morgue intake phone keeps receiving calls from tomorrow. We keep a landline in the intake office for hospitals and police to coordinate arrivals. Around 4 a.m. during the slowest hour, it rang with a case number we hadn't received yet. The caller calmly provided details: age, clothing, arrival time, cause of death pending investigation. I wrote it down assuming the dispatcher was early with paperwork. An hour later, the exact case arrived, matching every detail. It happened again the next night, and the next. Each call always came 1 hour before the body. Last night I asked who was calling. A pause followed. Then the voice said it was easier if we prepared early, because I always looked surprised when they arrived. I checked the ID log. Every call originated from our own phone line, placed 60 minutes in the future. Story 19. The old case, partner I buried, keeps riding with me on patrol. I had a partner once before Rivera, Officer Grant, a calm, methodical cop who taught me how to slow down at scenes and notice what others rushed past. He died during a winter response years ago, when his cruiser slid off a rural road during the storm. I was first on scene that night, and for months afterward, I'd still glance at the passenger seat expecting him to comment on my driving. Eventually, that faded, until last winter. I was finishing a late patrol shift when dispatch assigned me to a stranded motorist on County Route 6, the same road where Grant crashed. Snow fell lightly, not enough to worry about, but the closer I drove, the quieter the radio felt, like background static softened. Halfway there, I heard the passenger seatbelt click, not loudly, just a subtle plastic snap as tension pulls it tight. I assumed my gear bag shifted, but when I looked, the belt stretched across an empty seat. I laughed nervously and kept driving. A minute later, the heater knob turned 1 notch warmer. My hand stayed on the wheel. I pulled over and checked the car. Nothing loose, no malfunction. I almost cleared the call right then, but forced myself back onto the road. At the exact mile marker of the old crash, the radio crackled. Not dispatch. Grant's voice, calm as always. "Slow down here." I instinctively eased off the gas. Seconds later, my headlights caught black ice across the curve, invisible until you were on it. I would have hit it at full speed. I stopped the cruiser in the shoulder and sat shaking. Dispatch asked why I'd halted. I told them road conditions. They said no one else reported ice. When I returned to the station, the passenger door was slightly ajar, and a faint line of melted snow ran across the seat, like boots had rested there. Since then, every night shift near dawn, the belt tightens beside me again, always just before something happens. Story 20. My sister's friend keeps visiting after the funeral. My sister's best friend Marissa passed away suddenly. Illness, quick and unfair. For weeks afterward, my sister stayed at my place because she couldn't stand the silence of her apartment. She kept her friend's sweater draped over the couch arm and sometimes spoke about her in present tense without noticing. The first odd thing happened 3 nights later. I heard the kettle boiling in the kitchen at 2 a.m. and assumed my sister couldn't sleep. I found a mug on the counter already filled, steam curling upward, but she was still asleep on the couch. In the morning, she asked if I'd made tea overnight. I hadn't. She went quiet and said Marissa always drank tea when she couldn't rest. After that, small things repeated. The bathroom light on after we turned it off. The faint smell of her floral shampoo in the hallway. My sister waking convinced someone had sat beside her while she slept. One evening, her phone buzzed. A new message in an old conversation thread. No number attached, just a typing indicator. It stayed for nearly a minute before a final message appeared. You left the window open again. That night we checked every window. The living room one, Marissa's usual seat, was unlocked though we hadn't touched it. My sister now says the apartment isn't empty anymore, just quieter than before. Story 21. The patient in room 312 keeps asking me to close the door. I never open night rounds and the hospital blur together. Vitals, charts, dim lights, whispered conversations. Room 312 had been empty for 2 days, awaiting cleaning after a transfer. I passed it often and never went inside. Yet every time I walked by, I heard a faint voice asking if I could shut the door. The door was always already closed. I assumed sound traveled from another room until one night I opened it to prove it empty. The bed was stripped, the room cold, but the bathroom light flicked off behind me as if someone had just stepped out. I left quickly and reported faulty wiring. Later reviewing patient records, I learned the last occupant had repeatedly asked staff to close his door before he passed. Even when it was shut, the following shift I found the door open, just slightly, and from inside, the same tired voice asked if I could stay a minute longer. This time, story 22, the backup officer I requested, had my badge number. Late shifts in our district usually meant quiet patrol, so when I responded to a report of someone standing inside a closed elementary school after hours, I didn't expect trouble. The alarm company said motion sensors triggered twice near the cafeteria. Standard check. The building was dark when I arrived, the kind of darkness that swallows sound. My flashlight beam stretched across polished floors, reflecting back at me in long, pale strips. I announced myself and walked the hallway slowly, every classroom door locked. Halfway to the cafeteria, I heard footsteps behind me. Measured, matching mine exactly, stopping when I stopped. I turned, empty corridor. I radioed dispatch for a second unit, giving my location and badge number. The reply came, back immediately. Back up en route. Unit identifies as you. I asked them to repeat. They read my own badge number as the responding unit. Seconds later, a figure appeared at the far end of the hallway, silhouette shaped by exit sign light. Same height, same posture. Even the slight tilt of the shoulders I developed after years wearing a vest. I called out. It didn't answer, just kept pace behind me while I continued checking rooms. When I finally exited the building, the parking lot was empty except my cruiser. Dispatch asked if I'd made contact with the assisting officer yet. GPS showed 2 units clearing the call. My dash cam footage later showed the passenger door opening briefly while I stood outside finishing the report. No one visible entering, but the seatbelt tightened on its own. Story 23. My girlfriend met my friend before I introduced them. I'd been planning to introduce my girlfriend Hannah to my friend Marcus for weeks, but schedules never lined up. One evening, she mentioned she'd run into him at a cafe downtown and talked for nearly an hour. I laughed because she'd never met him. She described him perfectly, his habit of tapping the table while thinking, the scar near his eyebrow. Even the story about our high school road trip I'd never told her. I called Marcus. He confirmed the conversation, except he thought he was talking to me the entire time. He said I'd acted distracted and quieter than usual, but blamed it on my mood. He sent a photo they took together. It showed him smiling beside someone my height and build, the face blurred by glare. Hannah insisted that person had been me. I was at work that whole afternoon, clocked in and on camera. Now neither of them feels certain they've ever met the real version of the other. Story 24. The morgue refrigerator logged a temperature for someone not inside our storage units. Record temperature changes constantly, tiny fluctuations logged automatically. One night drawer, 8 showed a steady increase, the kind that happens when a body is placed inside, but the drawer was empty. I opened it. Cold air spilled out normally. No remains, no tag. Yet the log recorded weight distribution and internal temperature adjusting for hours, like someone resting there. At 3:17 a.m., the reading returned to baseline. The same moment the elevator downstairs opened, a new arrival rolled in from the ER. Time of death estimated exactly 3 hours earlier. The chart listed location found. The same address attached to a case I'd processed the week before the person died. Story 25. The 911 call came from my own living room. While I was on patrol night, patrol was quiet enough that I'd started memorizing the sounds of my cruiser. The hum at 45 miles per hour, the slight rattle in the radio mount, even the way the heater fan changed pitch after midnight. I was halfway through my route when dispatch read an address that made my hands tighten on the wheel, my home address. They said an open line had dialed 911, breathing, faint movement, no words. My partner Miller glanced at me, waiting for a reaction, but procedure meant we still responded like any other call. The drive felt longer than it should have been. Every turn familiar yet wrong. I kept trying to call my wife, no answer. Then my sister, who sometimes stayed over, straight to voicemail. Dispatch stayed on the line with whoever had called. They said they could hear footsteps inside and a television playing quietly. We pulled up, all lights off, no movement in the windows. I unlocked the door carefully and announced police presence. The air inside felt warmer than outside, like someone had been walking through recently. The TV in the living room glowed with static, even though I clearly remembered turning it off before shift. Dispatch asked if we'd made contact yet. Then the operator said something strange. The caller was whispering now, repeating details about the officers entering, describing exactly where we stood in the house. Miller stared at me as we moved room to room, no one there. In the bedroom, my phone sat on the nightstand, screen lit, call in progress to 911, but the dispatcher said the voice they heard wasn't coming from that phone anymore. It was still describing us walking through the hallway behind them. Story 26. My best friend and I keep remembering different versions of the same night. Ryan and I met after work to watch a game at the bar we'd gone to for years. The night felt normal. Same drinks, same arguments about teams, same walk to the parking lot afterward. The next morning, he texted asking why I'd left early after the fight. There was no fight. We'd laughed and left together. He insisted someone had started shouting near the dartboards and I'd stepped outside alone while he paid the tab. He even remembered apologizing to the bartender for my behavior. I checked my receipt. Timestamp showed we closed out at the same time. We compared details and realized whole parts of the night didn't match. Different songs playing, different people sitting beside us. In his memory, I'd spilled my drink and stormed out. In mine, we talked calmly about work until closing. Security footage solved nothing. The bartender showed us the recording. Both versions happened. At different moments, the video alternated between two overlapping nights, one calm, one tense, and in each, One of us reacted to events the other never experienced. Near the end of the footage, both versions briefly aligned. We stood outside. Only one of us remained in frame afterward. Neither of us remembers which. Story 27. The hospital patient. Knew when I would quit my job. During a night rounds, I spent extra time with an older patient, recovering from surgery because he couldn't sleep and liked conversation. He'd ask routine questions about my job, then gradually started answering things I hadn't said yet, finishing my thoughts about stress, shift changes, even my plans to request a transfer. One night, he asked why I'd decided to leave next month. I hadn't told anyone I was considering it. He described the conversation I'd have with my supervisor days later, word for word. I laughed it off but wrote it down anyway. A week later, the meeting happened exactly as he'd said. I returned to his room shaken, ready to ask how he knew. The bed was empty. He'd been discharged that morning, hours before I arrived. Even though I'd spoken to him the previous night, his chart contained a final note written in my handwriting thanking me for listening. Story 28. My partner answered a call I never made. It was just after 2 a.m. when my radio chirped and my partner Ellis said he was returning my phone call. I told him I hadn't called. I'd been driving the river route for the past 20 minutes and hadn't touched my phone. He insisted I'd sounded urgent, telling him to meet me at the old rail bridge outside town. Dispatch logs showed no such request, but Ellis was already halfway there, and I decided to follow, just in case someone had spoofed my number. The bridge had been closed for years after a structural collapse. Nothing out there but gravel and slow water beneath rusted beams. When I arrived, Ellis stood by his cruiser looking uneasy. He said I'd told him someone was waiting under the bridge who still thought the crash just happened. We both remembered the accident from our rookie year. A car went through the railing during heavy fog, driver never found. We'd searched the banks for hours. As we talked, my phone rang in my pocket. Caller ID, my number. I answered. Through the speaker came the sound of rushing water and wind, and my own voice calmly giving Ellis the directions again, exactly as he'd first heard them. Behind us, gravel shifted under unseen, footsteps moving toward the edge. Story 29. My friend slept over and left, footprints in a room. He never entered. My friend Mateo stayed over after helping me move furniture. We kept most boxes in the spare room while he slept on the couch. Around dawn, I woke to the sound of someone walking barefoot down the hallway, soft steps crossing from the living room toward the spare room. I assumed he needed something and went back to sleep. In the morning, he asked why I'd opened the spare room during the night. I hadn't. We checked together. A thin layer of dust from unpacked drywall covered the floor. Perfect footprints leading inside and stopping beside a sealed box we hadn't opened yet. The prints matched Mateo's foot size exactly. He swore he'd never gone in. Inside the box were old photos from the previous homeowner we'd just received from storage, including one showing the same room years earlier with identical furniture placement and a person standing where the footprints ended. Mateo looked at it and quietly said he dreamed of that exact spot overnight, standing there waiting for someone to notice him. Story 30. The morgue elevator. Open to a floor that was removed, the hospital renovated years ago and sealed the old basement level, but the elevator panel still had the faded outline where the button used to be. Around 3:40 a.m., during my quietest shift, the elevator doors opened while I stood alone in the hall. The indicator showed no floor, just blank, Cold air drifted out, carrying a smell like old disinfectant and wet concrete. I stepped closer and saw a corridor below, dim, unfinished, lights flickering, where the old record said the hospital stored patients decades ago before modern facilities existed. I never pressed anything. The doors stayed open long enough for me to hear a gurney wheel squeak from somewhere below, rolling slowly toward the elevator. Then they closed. The panel lit normally again. Later, that night, intake delivered a body from an address demolished 40 years earlier. The same year that lower floor was sealed. The toe tag listed the time of death as 10 minutes before the elevator opened. Story 31. My girlfriend recognized a police case I'd never told her about. I try not to bring work home. After years on patrol, you learn some things stay in the locker room, especially the cases that linger in your head longer than they should. One of those was a missing child report from early in my career. We searched for days, found only a bicycle near a drainage path, and eventually the investigation transferred to another department. I never spoke about it outside the station. Years later, sitting at dinner with my girlfriend Anna, she casually asked me why I still kept the back hallway light on at night. I laughed and said habit. She frowned. Because of the path behind your childhood house. I stared at her. I'd never mentioned that location. The bike had been found behind my old neighborhood before we'd ever met. She kept describing details, the fence with chipped paint, the shallow ditch, even the way I'd stood there during the search, feeling like someone was still watching from the trees. Every word matched the report in my memory. I asked how she knew. She said she dreamed it repeatedly over the past week, always from my perspective, seeing my hands holding the flashlight, hearing officers call out into darkness. That night, I checked the old case file stored digitally at the station. A new entry appeared at the bottom, a witness statement recorded the previous evening, name listed Anna, time stamped while she'd been home with me the entire night. Story 32, the officer I replaced, keeps logging into the computer I transferred to overnight desk duty after a minor injury. Temporary assignment handling reports and monitoring calls. The position used to belong to an older officer named Klein, who retired months earlier after decades in service. My second week, I noticed reports already sorted before I arrived. At first, I thought day shift helped, but they denied touching overnight paperwork. Yet every morning, the stack matched exactly how Klein used to organize them. I'd heard stories about his precise habits. One evening, the computer logged me out mid-report. The login screen appeared. Username already filled. KLINEJ. I assumed the system auto-filled old data until the cursor moved by itself, entering a password and opening a report template I hadn't requested. The document described a noise complaint across town. Minutes later, dispatch assigned me that exact call. It continued, small things first, then full narratives typed before events occurred. Even phrasing matched how veteran officers described scenes. I finally asked Klein during a department visit if he'd remotely accessed anything. He looked uneasy. He said he'd never been issued remote credentials, and he'd avoided the station at night since retirement because sometimes, while at home, he heard the printer in the office start running. Story 33. My friend and I took different roads. Home but arrived together. After a late movie, my friend Derek and I left the parking lot at the same time, but headed opposite directions toward our houses across town. We joked about who'd make it home first and called once we arrived. I reached my driveway, grabbed my phone to dial him. and he was already on the porch behind me. I thought he'd driven faster and circled around. He said he'd just watched me turn down his street 10 minutes earlier while he was still on his route. He'd even honked, but I hadn't reacted. We compared maps. Our drives never crossed. The security camera showed me pulling in alone. But seconds before I walked up the steps, another set of headlights passed slowly behind me and parked briefly across the street. No car visible. Afterward, Derek now refuses to race home again. He says he's not sure which version of us arrived first,